It had been a day like any other when I met her. At least, that's how it started. I was just a mechanic, a human who found himself on the remote planet of Tormak, stuck in a small outpost working on a fleet of ships. I was used to strange creatures, peculiar cultures, and weird customs, but I never imagined how much one simple touch could change my life forever. Her name was Rikora, a native Tormakian of the feline-like species known as the Thesari. Tall and graceful, with shimmering fur that seemed to shift between shades of violet and silver in the sunlight, she exuded an aura of nobility. Her cat-like eyes, with their piercing golden irises, always seemed to be observing everything, measuring everything. When I first laid eyes on her, she had been standing in the far corner of the repair shop, leaning against a wall, watching me with curiosity. I hadn't thought much of her presence at the time. Tormak was full of travelers, explorers, and off-world merchants, and I had learned to ignore most of them. But something about her caught my attention. The way she held herself, proud, yet calm, was different. She wasn't here just to fix a ship or buy some supplies. There was something else in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. "Excuse me," her voice suddenly broke through my thoughts, smooth and melodic with an almost ethereal quality to it. "I need your assistance, human." I looked up, startled by her directness. She wasn't asking. She wasn't begging for help. She was simply making a statement. Sure," I said, trying to ignore the wave of self-consciousness that washed over me. "What's the problem?" "I have a vessel that needs repairs," she said, stepping closer. Her movements were fluid and precise, like a predator assessing its prey. "It's important that it be fixed soon. I'm not used to waiting." I nodded, swallowing the sudden lump in my throat. I had seen all kinds of beings in my years as a mechanic, but the Thesari were a class of their own. Legends spoke of their agility, their grace, and their deep connection to the natural world. I'd heard whispers about their culture, their customs, and most notably, their physical traits. Among the Thesari, there was one thing no one dared to talk about in public. A sacred bond that was so private, it was considered taboo even to mention it. As I followed her toward the ship, I couldn't help but notice the way she moved, each step measured, deliberate. The way her long tail swayed behind her, twitching just slightly, sent a flicker of unease through me. The tail was not just a physical appendage. It was a symbol of her status, her culture, her being. And I had learned from my time here that certain customs with the Thesari were complex. Rikora led me to the back of her ship, the light from the setting sun casting a soft glow over the sleek, polished metal of the vessel. She glanced at me briefly, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if making some kind of silent judgment. "It's nothing too complicated," she said, her tone still calm but with an edge. "Just a few systems need recalibration. You can handle it, I trust." I was about to answer when, in a strange twist of fate, I reached to touch a panel beside her. I was so focused on the task at hand that I didn't realize she had stepped just a little too close. My hand brushed against her tail, a soft, delicate touch, but a touch nonetheless. Time seemed to stop. The world around me shifted in an instant, and I saw her reaction before I even registered what had happened. Her tail, which had been lazily swishing behind her just moments before, went rigid. Her entire body froze. Her pupils dilated, and her breathing quickened ever so slightly. And then, she slowly turned her head to look at me, her gaze sharp and intense. I stood there, stunned, trying to piece together what had just occurred. I had touched her tail. It was an accident, nothing more, just a moment of clumsiness. But the way she was staring at me now, it felt like I had just triggered something monumental. I began to stammer, trying to apologize, but her voice cut me off. "You touched my tail," she said, her voice low and heavy, filled with an emotion I couldn't understand. There was something dangerous in her tone now, something primal. "Do you know what that means?" I shook my head, confused and a little afraid. I didn't mean to. Look, I'm sorry, You don't understand, human, she interrupted, stepping closer, her golden eyes locking onto mine with an intensity one couldn't escape. Her tail twitched again, but this time it wasn't from irritation. It was something else. That was no ordinary touch. What you've just done is the most sacred bonding ritual of my people. I felt my stomach drop. Bonding? Ritual? The words barely registered in my mind. My heart was racing, my mind scrambling to make sense of what was happening. Wait, hold on. What are you talking about? I just touched your tail, by accident. She exhaled sharply, as though trying to regain her composure. Her tail flicked behind her once more, but the movement now seemed controlled, deliberate. In my culture, that touch, it binds us. It is the start of a sacred connection, a union between our spirits. Once a Thasari's tail is touched by someone else, by someone of another species, it cannot be undone. I stared at her, my mind spinning. This had to be a misunderstanding, some cultural oddity, a miscommunication. But the look in her eyes, the way she was standing so close to me, her body radiating with a new intensity, told me this was real. Too real. My hand had touched her tail, and now I was stuck in a bond one had no idea how to navigate. You're saying that, because I accidentally touched your tail, we're somehow bonded? I repeated, incredulity lacing my words. That's sacred, she said firmly. Yes. It is sacred. And it is not something that can be taken lightly. You must now accept the responsibility that comes with this bond. I stepped back, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of her words. What kind of responsibility? Her eyes softened slightly, but the seriousness of her gaze never faltered. You must marry me, human. I blinked, thinking I had heard her wrong. What? It is the law of my people, she continued. And once the bond is made, it cannot be undone. Your touch, your gesture, has already sealed our fate. You and I are now tied together, as husband and wife. I opened my mouth to argue, to reject what she was saying, but the words caught in my throat. I had no idea what to do with this information, no idea how to process it. I wasn't prepared for this. I wasn't ready for this. But Ricora was staring at me, waiting for my response. And I realized, in that moment, that there was no turning back from this. Somehow, my life had just become a lot more complicated than I could have ever imagined. I stood there in stunned silence, trying to make sense of everything. My mind was racing, my thoughts tumbling over one another. I couldn't fathom how a simple, accidental touch of her tail could possibly lead to something as monumental as marriage. It felt absurd. A misunderstanding, surely. Some strange cultural quirk that didn't apply to me, a human mechanic with no stake in Thasari traditions. But Ricora wasn't backing down. Her expression remained calm, though there was a hint of urgency in her eyes, as if she were waiting for me to accept this inevitable turn of events. Her tail swished behind her again, moving with an elegance that almost made me forget the chaos of the situation. You're serious, I said finally, my voice betraying my disbelief. This isn't some kind of joke. She didn't smile. Her golden eyes locked onto mine, unwavering. This is no joke, human. You've touched the most sacred part of my body. That touch binds us together in a way you cannot undo. If you try to break it, it will only bring dishonor upon both of us. And dishonor is something neither of us can afford. I felt the weight of her words, each one heavy with meaning. I wanted to argue, to deny the whole thing, but there was something in the way she stood, in the way her posture commanded respect, that told me she wasn't bluffing. This was real. It was happening. I took a step back, my thoughts spinning. But I don't even know you. I don't know anything about your people. Your traditions. This whole bond thing, it's too much. I didn't ask for this, and I don't know how to deal with it. Rikora took a deep breath, her gaze softening just a fraction. I understand your confusion. This isn't something a human could possibly prepare for. But the bond has already been established. It's a spiritual connection between us. One that transcends your understanding. Your role now is to accept it, to embrace it, for both our sakes. Embrace it? I repeated, the word foreign on my tongue. How? I don't even know what that means. You're telling me to marry you, just because I touched your tail? She stepped closer, her voice lowering. Yes, because the bond is a sacred promise to protect, to honor, and to build something greater together. Your ancestors might not have known it, but the bond is an ancient one, recognized across the galaxy in many forms. For the Thesari, it's not just about a touch. It's about the joining of spirits. And once the bond is made, there's no going back. I felt my heart race, a sense of panic creeping up on me. This was insane. I had no idea what I was getting into, and it was all spiraling out of control. I had come to Tormak to fix ships and mind my own business. I hadn't signed up for whatever this was. Okay, I said, trying to make sense of it all. Let's say I believe you. Let's say this bond is real. What happens now? Do we just get married tomorrow? I don't know the first thing about your customs. How is this even supposed to work? Rikora stood still, her gaze intense but somehow patient. There's no rushing it, she said. Marriage in my culture is not something done in haste. It's a sacred union, a slow process of merging our lives, our souls. But the first step has already been taken. You cannot deny the bond. My thoughts were a whirlwind. Marriage. Sacred union. Souls. Everything about this felt like it was out of my depth. The more she explained, the more I realized I was tangled up in something I couldn't escape. But deep down, beneath the panic and confusion, something stirred in me. A curiosity. A fascination. I'm not sure I'm ready for any of this, I admitted, my voice quieter now. But, you're right. I don't really have a choice, do I? No, she said softly. You don't. But this doesn't have to be a burden. It can be a new beginning for both of us. Her words struck a chord in me. She wasn't asking me to simply accept her. She was offering me something, an opportunity to build something together. But still, the weight of it all pressed heavily on my chest. I wasn't prepared for any of this. I was just a mechanic. I wasn't supposed to be part of an alien bond, let alone a marriage. Okay, I said, finally. I'll go along with this. For now. But I need to know more. I need to understand what I'm getting myself into. I don't want to be clueless. Rikora's expression softened, and for a moment, the fierce edge to her demeanor faded. I understand. I will teach you, Axel. I will show you what it means to be bonded in the way of my people. But first, we must take time to learn about each other. I nodded, though the uncertainty still gnawed at me. How could I learn about something as intimate as this when I didn't even understand the basics? But if I was going to be part of her world, I had to learn. What happens next? I asked. She stepped closer, her tail flicking lightly behind her, as if sensing the tension in the air. We begin the first stage of our union. The ritual of understanding. We'll spend time together, learning about each other, finding common ground. I will teach you the ways of my people. You will see the bond for what it is, not just in body, but in spirit. And if I don't agree to this? I asked, my heart still heavy with uncertainty. She didn't flinch. If you refuse the bond, you will break it, and it will bring dishonor to both of us. But if you accept, it will change you, Axel. You will never be the same. The bond is not simply a contract. It's a transformation. And once we begin, there is no turning back. I took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling into my chest. No turning back. The reality of it hit me like a ton of bricks. There was no backing out now. Okay, I said, finally. I'll do it. I'll go along with it. But I still have a lot of questions. Rikora's eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw a hint of what could be tenderness behind her steely gaze. Then let us begin, Axel. But remember, the bond is sacred. And it will change everything. As she turned and walked toward the rear of the ship, I followed her, unsure of what lay ahead but knowing one thing for certain, my life was never going to be the same again. The days that followed felt like I was in a daze. I kept telling myself that it was all just a misunderstanding, that I hadn't really bonded with Rikora, that this was some bizarre misunderstanding I could eventually escape from. But every time I looked at her, something in my chest tightened, and the weight of her words, her culture, and the bond we shared, settled deeper into me. Rikora was patient with me, too patient, it seemed. She didn't push me to accept this bond right away, but there was an unspoken understanding between us that it was happening, whether I liked it or not. She taught me about her people's customs, their culture, and the sacredness of the bond that had been forged between us. But each time we spoke about it, I still felt a growing sense of dread. What did it mean for me to be bound to her, to a race so different from my own? We spent our time together, learning, talking, sometimes just sitting in silence as we watched the stars pass by. But the more I learned about Rikora's culture, the more I realized how little I truly understood. The Thesari were a proud people, their customs rooted in their connection to nature, to the stars, and to each other. The tail, she explained, was more than just an appendage, it was a symbol of strength, of identity, and of connection. To touch it was to accept the sacred bond that came with it, a bond that connected not just bodies but souls. I still didn't fully understand it. I didn't know if I ever would. But I was trying. Every moment, every glance, every conversation with Rikora chipped away at the walls I had built around myself. And yet, the more I learned, the more I realized I was just a stranger in her world. The culture was so different from my own that sometimes it felt like I was stumbling through a labyrinth, unable to find my way out. Rikora's calm demeanor, her self-assured confidence, only made me feel more lost. She moved with such grace, such elegance, as though she were born into this world of sacred rituals and binding connections. I felt like I was merely tagging along, watching from the outside. I didn't know how long we had been traveling, but we were nearing a new destination, an isolated moon known as Veres. Rikora had explained that it was a place where Thesari performed the ritual of bonding, where the final steps of the union were solidified. My heart sank at the thought of it. The ritual would bind us in ways I couldn't yet comprehend, and the thought of it made my skin crawl with nerves. I stood on the deck of the ship, staring out into the infinite void of space. The stars sparkled like diamonds, distant and cold. I had always found comfort in the quiet of space. It was a place where I could think, where the world seemed to fall away. But today, as I looked at the stars, I felt a weight I couldn't shake. Behind me, I heard Rikora's soft footsteps approaching. She had been quiet lately, ever since I had started pulling away from her. I didn't mean to, but the distance felt necessary. She was a part of something I couldn't fully grasp. And no matter how much I wanted to understand, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was out of my depth. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. I turned to face her, my chest tightening at the sight of her. Rikora was beautiful, in a way I had never seen before. Her silver and violet fur shimmered in the low light, her eyes gleaming with a quiet intensity. She was a mystery, and no matter how many times I tried to solve it, I couldn't get close. I don't know if I am, I admitted, my voice quieter than I intended. I don't know if I'll ever be ready for this. Rikora's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there, just long enough for me to notice. You don't have to be ready right now, she said, stepping closer to me. The bond is something that grows, something that takes time. There's no rush. But when you're ready to accept it, you'll know. I swallowed, trying to make sense of her words. I still didn't understand how something as simple as a touch could lead to something so deep, so life-changing. I wanted to understand. I wanted to feel like I belonged in this strange, alien world. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I could ever accept the bond. I've been thinking about what you said, I said slowly, my mind still racing. About the bond. About us. And I don't know if I can do it, Rikora. I don't know if I'm ready to commit to something so sacred. Her expression remained unreadable, but I could sense the quiet patience behind her gaze. She didn't rush me, didn't try to pressure me into making a decision. She simply waited. Axel, she said softly, using my name for the first time in the conversation. I understand your hesitation. This isn't something you can rush into. The bond is not something you should take lightly. But it's not about being ready. It's about trust. Trust in me, in the bond, in what we can become together. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. There was something in her words, in the way she said them, that made me feel a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't about being ready. Maybe it was about trust. About finding something in each other that we couldn't find anywhere else. I don't know if I trust myself right now, I said, almost in a whisper. But I'll try. I'll try to understand, Rikora. I can't promise I'll be perfect. But I'll try. She reached out then, her fingers brushing against my hand in a soft, almost hesitant touch. My pulse quickened at the contact, and I looked up at her, startled by the tenderness in her gaze. You don't need to be perfect, she said quietly, her voice filled with warmth. You just need to be real. In that moment, something shifted between us. The walls I had built around myself, the walls I had erected out of fear and confusion, started to crumble. Maybe this was real. Maybe there was something here worth exploring, even if I didn't understand it completely. I nodded, the weight in my chest easing just slightly. Okay, I said, my voice steadier now. Let's see where this goes. She smiled, the warmth in her expression spreading to me like a gentle wave. We'll take it one step at a time, Axel. And when you're ready, we'll begin the next phase of our bond. Together. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since this whole crazy thing began, I felt like I was starting to understand. Maybe the bond wasn't about rushing into something. Maybe it was about learning to trust, learning to take each step as it came. And maybe, just maybe, there was more to this than I ever imagined. The days after that conversation were a blur of emotions. I was still trying to process everything, trying to come to terms with the fact that I was now part of something far bigger than I had ever imagined. But at least Rikora and I had reached an understanding. We weren't rushing into anything, but we were both moving forward in our own way. We continued our journey toward the Moon of Veres, the place where the final step of the bond would take place. My mind wandered between fear and curiosity, as I wondered just what awaited us there. Was this the turning point, the moment everything would change? Or was it just another step in a process I still didn't fully comprehend? I spent much of my time on the ship in quiet contemplation, staring out into the vast expanse of space. The stars, so distant and cold, seemed to reflect my thoughts. It was hard to escape the feeling of being caught between two worlds, the one I had left behind on Earth, and the one I was now thrust into, with Rikora and her people, their customs, their way of life. Rikora had been patient with me, as she always was. She'd explained the meaning of the final step in the ritual, the completion of the bond, and how it would change everything. But what exactly it would change, she couldn't say. I couldn't help but feel that she was holding something back. There were pieces of the puzzle I wasn't seeing, and it frustrated me. On the 6th day after our conversation, we arrived on Varys. The moon was barren, with dusty, rocky landscapes stretching as far as the eye could see. It was a place of quiet, where only a few scattered buildings remained, relics of a once thriving civilization. Now, it was a place of pilgrimage, a site of great importance to the Thessari. The ship touched down softly on the landing platform, and I felt the ground beneath us hum with the energy of the place. As we disembarked, I looked around, taking in the stark beauty of Varys. There was an eerie calm here, a kind of stillness that hung in the air, like the very land was waiting for something. Rikora didn't say much as we walked toward the central temple. The structure was ancient, its stone walls covered in intricate carvings depicting Thessari history, their beliefs, and the sacred rituals that had been passed down through the ages. This was a place of reverence, a place where the most important moments of a Thessari's life were honored. We entered the temple, and the atmosphere changed. The air inside was thick with incense, and soft, melodic chants echoed through the halls. The walls were adorned with tapestries that shimmered in the dim light, depicting images of the Thessari ancestors. At the center of the temple stood an altar, bathed in soft, golden light, with a cushion placed before it. "This is where it happens," Rikora said softly, her voice reverberating in the quiet space. She turned to me, her eyes soft but filled with a knowing intensity. "The final step in the bonding ritual. It is here that we will solidify our connection." I looked at her, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment where everything would change. I had been nervous, uncertain, even angry at times, but now, standing in the temple, I realized there was no more running. I was already too far in. There was no turning back. I followed Rikora to the altar, my breath shallow, my mind racing. The weight of everything, the bond, the marriage, the sacredness of the ritual, hung heavily on my shoulders. But even through the fear, I could sense something else beneath the surface, a deep connection, a pull that had been growing between us ever since that first, accidental touch. Rikora stepped forward, her posture regal and serene as she knelt before the altar. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to do, before following her lead and kneeling beside her. The moment I did, a soft glow filled the room, emanating from the altar, and I felt something shift within me, something deep, something ancient. Rikora looked at me, her golden eyes gleaming in the soft light. "Are you ready, Axel?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. I nodded, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "I'm ready," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. I wasn't sure if anyone could ever be truly ready for something like this. She reached out then, her hand gently cupping my chin, tilting my face toward hers. Her fingers were soft, yet strong, and as she touched me, I felt a surge of energy flow through me, a deep, resonant power that seemed to echo through every part of my being. And then, without warning, she lowered her face, her lips brushing against mine in a soft, sacred kiss. The world seemed to shift in that moment. The room blurred, the air thick with the energy of the ritual. I felt my heart race, my blood pounding in my ears as the bond between us solidified, a connection that was deeper than anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a merging of spirits, a joining of lives. It was everything the Thessari had told me about the ritual, but it was more than I had imagined. Rikora pulled back slightly, her forehead resting gently against mine. Her tail flicked behind her, brushing lightly against my leg. The touch was soft, comforting, but also intense, as if it were the final thread that tied us together. "You feel it, don't you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The bond is complete. We are one now." I closed my eyes, trying to process everything that had just happened. I felt different. Something had changed inside me, something that wasn't there before. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual. It was as if the bond had unlocked a part of me I didn't know existed, and now I was forever connected to her. I feel it, I said, my voice hoarse. I don't know how, but I feel it. Rikora smiled, a rare softness in her gaze as she pulled away just enough to look at me fully. It's a bond that transcends time, Axel. Once it is forged, it lasts for eternity. The weight of her words hit me like a hammer. Eternity. This wasn't just some temporary arrangement. This was forever. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain, my life had been forever changed. I don't know what's next, I said quietly, my voice full of uncertainty. But I'll face it with you, Rikora. I don't know where this bond will take us, but I know I'm not alone anymore. Her smile widened, and for the first time since this all began, I saw true warmth in her eyes. You're not alone anymore, Axel. We're in this together. And we will face whatever comes next as one. I didn't know what lay ahead for us, but as I looked into her eyes, I knew that whatever it was, we would face it together. And in that moment, despite the overwhelming uncertainty, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The bond had been forged. And with it, our future was set. The bond had been forged, and for the first time, I felt as though I had found my place in the universe. I wasn't just a mechanic anymore. I wasn't just a human stumbling through an alien world. I was part of something far greater, part of Rikora's world, part of her people, and, in some strange way, a part of the very legacy she carried within her. The days after the ritual were strange. It wasn't just that my connection with Rikora had changed, it was that the world around me had changed. I could feel it in the air. The stars outside the ship seemed brighter, more alive, as if they were watching us, waiting for us to take the next step in our journey. Veres had been a place of pilgrimage for the Thessari, a place where many important rituals were performed. It was now the site of our bond, a place where everything changed. It was both an ending and a beginning. And though I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me, I knew that the real challenge was just beginning. After the ritual, Rikora and I spent the next few days on Veres, adjusting to the bond and learning more about each other. The time we spent together was quiet, reflective. It was as if the world had slowed down, allowing us to catch our breath, to understand what we had committed to. But even as we learned to navigate our new reality, I knew there were challenges ahead. Our bond wasn't just something between us, it was something that affected everything. Rikora had made it clear that this bond held meaning not just in our personal lives, but also in the larger picture of the Thessari. This was the beginning of something that would shape our future, and, perhaps, the future of her people. On the 5th day after the ritual, as we sat on the edge of the temple, watching the moons of Veres pass overhead, Rikora turned to me with a serious expression. Axel, she said, her voice steady but filled with something I couldn't quite place. There are those who will challenge our bond. The enemies of my people, the ones who fear what the bond represents, will not sit idly by. I glanced at her, sensing the gravity in her words. What do you mean? Who are they? Those who wish to maintain control of the Thessari legacy, she said, her eyes hardening. They believe that the bond between us is a threat. That it will give us too much power, too much influence over the Thessari future. There are factions within our society who see us as a danger, Axel. And they will do whatever it takes to break the bond. I felt a cold knot settle in my stomach. You mean, we're not safe? She shook her head. Not yet. But we will be. The bond may be sacred, but it is not without its enemies. We will need to be vigilant, Axel. We cannot let fear or doubt take hold of us now. I nodded, trying to make sense of it all. I hadn't expected this kind of resistance. I hadn't realized how deep the politics ran within Rikora's world. The Thessari were not just a race of proud, noble beings. They were a people torn by factions, by rivalries, and by power struggles that I didn't fully understand. "I'll stand by you," I said, my voice steady despite the tension in my chest. "I don't know what's coming, but I'm not going anywhere. Not now." Rikora's eyes softened, and she placed her hand on mine, her touch reassuring. "Thank you, Axel. Your strength means more to me than you know." I looked at her, seeing the flicker of vulnerability in her gaze. She was still Rikora, the strong, confident leader of the Thessari. But I could see it now, the weight she carried. The pressure of expectations. And the uncertainty that clung to her like a shadow. We stood up together, and as we walked back to the ship, the weight of what lay ahead seemed to settle over us both. I didn't know exactly what challenges we would face. I didn't know how we would navigate the politics of Rikora's people, or what the future held for us. But for the first time, I felt as though we were truly connected. The bond was real now, and it wasn't just a concept, it was something that would carry us through whatever came next. As we boarded the ship and prepared to leave Veres, the stars above us seemed to glow a little brighter. I didn't know if it was just my imagination, or if it was the bond between us making the universe feel smaller, more intimate. But I felt a strange sense of peace, even amidst the uncertainty. "We'll figure this out," Rikora said softly, her eyes fixed on the stars outside the window. "Together." I nodded, my hand finding hers once again. This was the start of something new, something bigger than either of us could have ever predicted. The future was uncertain, and the challenges we would face were real. But we weren't alone. We had each other, and that was enough, for now.